Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pros podcast. I'm your host, Tally Shamus, and today I'm joined by author Kern Carter, and we discuss community building for writers. Make sure to stay until the end to hear Kern's most valuable advice for new writers. Kern is celebrated for his captivating storytelling. With 5 books published, including And Then There Was Us and Boys and Girls Screaming, he has garnered critical acclaim and a devoted following. And Then There Was Us was named one of the top teen novels of the year by Indigo, and Boys and Girls Screaming was included on several must-read lists. Kern was also named an author to watch by CBC and Narratively. Beyond his writing, Kern champions emerging talent by creating online platforms that provide a supportive space for new writers to build confidence and connect in community. So Kern, thank you so much for joining me here today. Why don't you start by telling our listeners what your writing journey has been like?
First of all, thanks. I'm super excited. I'm very grateful for my writing journey because I've been able to experience pretty much every part of publishing. I was a self-published author for my first 2 novels. Then my first published novel was with an indie publisher. Now it's Penguin and Scholastic. I feel like I've experienced the entire gamut of publishing. Also, me being someone who wanted to write since I was 8 years old, like I was a child knowing I wanted to be an author. And what I give myself credit for though is that I stuck with that dream the entire time. Like I didn't give myself really any other option of what I was going to do, you know? So even when I was doing odd jobs and figuring out my life and figuring out how to make money, it was all with the intent of where I am now and then where I hope to be in the future, which is just like writing books.
That is so formidable, having this dream when you were so young and just following it through. I wasn't strong enough to do that. I always loved writing, but I decided to be a lawyer because that felt safe. And that was a mistake. So thankfully, I've made my way to what I feel is the right place to be. Anyway, I am such a fan of your post on Substack. I love the content that you post, and I love that it feels really authentic. I can hear your voice. And we know writing is so lonely. So can you tell me a little bit about how you go about building a community and how that helps you in this industry?
I want to actually step back from my Substack and go back to the first community that I felt that I really built, which was something called Cry Magazine. And with Cry Magazine, this was on Medium. You know, Medium was Substack before Substack. I started blogging, and I was just writing about my frustrations. This time I wasn't published. I felt like my writing wasn't being heard. So I was just venting, and I called my blog Cry because it was just me like shedding emotions. And then after I got through with venting, I'm like, you know, people were really responding to it. It would be cool if I gave other people the opportunity, other writers very specifically, the opportunity to talk about the emotional aspect of writing. And the name already fit, Cry already fit. So I was like, hey, I'll call it Cry Magazine. I'll see what happens. That thing took off. At its height, I was getting about 37,000, close to 40,000 views a month, without spending $1. You know, this is just off of the fact that I had tapped into something that was unique, that wasn't on the internet, at least not popular on the internet yet, especially in the writing spaces, and people were flocking to it. And we had dozens of submissions every week. We had to get an editor. But if you surveyed my Substack community right now, a fair amount of them right now, because my community is growing, but definitely at the start, most of them know me from Cry Magazine. Like they were fans of Cry Magazine before. So that's my kind of roundabout way of saying that I think building community is just about tapping into something that you all collectively believe in or all collectively are connected to, you know? I don't know if there's magic beyond that. I think that that is the magic, you know? And there are how-tos. People tell you do this and do that. You can do all the how-tos you want. If people are not connected to that genuine individual that's sharing the message, then it doesn't matter what kind of tricks that you use. It's not, people are just not going to connect. So for me, it's just like, what are you talking about? What what are you tapping into that feels emotional for people, that feels urgent for people, that feels like, you know, like this is something that needs to be talked about or felt or experienced in the moment. If there's one key, I would say it's urgency, you know?
Yeah. And so what do you feel is urgent right now? What are you writing about now? What are you seeing as some trends in the writing community?
Yeah, a few things. First of all, people are really mystified by what it means to be a writer and an author today. I write a lot about what it just means to be a writer and an author. But I think what separates my writing is that I try to connect what I'm experiencing into culture, into something that has to do with culture. And if you look at the posts from me, there are some posts that do wildly well. And if you look at the posts that really um, connect with people on a scale outside of my network, it's those pieces where I have found a way to take what I'm experiencing and connect it with culture. So I'll give you two examples. One actually just recently happened. I'm pitching a film. We're trying to get a showrunner on our team, and when we're having interviews, the showrunner who had read the treatment asked me, "Oh, why aren't your main characters black?" First of all, it caught me off guard. Even though this stuff has happened to me before, it kind of caught me off guard. So I gave a horrible answer. But my point is that is an experience of being a writer, but that's a cultural experience. Like that's a racial experience that people have. It's a cultural experience people have, right? Like the it connects beyond just the writing. That is what I think people really appreciate about the way that I write. Like I do speak pretty much only about like writing, publishing and stuff like that, but it's also with the lens of culture throughout it in some way. And I think that's really important. And then the other part of that is my my genuine interest is in publishing and pop culture. So I love studying the publishing industry and I love studying pop culture. Those things are also just a natural part of my existence. So when I'm writing about them, it doesn't feel like forced in anywhere. It doesn't feel like I'm reaching for anything. I enjoy doing the research, and so that also lets bleeds into the writing because you could feel my energy and my passion in the writing. So that's another thing that I think is really important. And then to your last question about what do I see happening in publishing right now and trends right now, the insight that I see is that if you can find a way to take a very specific cultural niche and tell a story around that, I think that is the next huge phase in publishing. Like, or to be honest, in entertainment in general, if you look at a movie like Sinners, right? Sinners is a vampire movie, right? It's something everyone can enjoy, but the vampire story is not what they framed the entire story around. They took a very niche cultural situation from the past, and then they built a very fun story around that. So if you can find a way to do that, and if there's a way to center those stories outside of North America, outside of the Western lens, even better. Because another trend that I see happening is that the world is starting to decenter the Western lens a little bit more. Before, American culture was culture, period. That's not exactly the case anymore. And I think as Western culture gets decentered, it's opening up spaces for other cultures, other countries to really share their stories. So if you're able to take those stories, but then how to make it accessible for a larger group of readers, now you're tapping into something that is special. I'm gonna start looking out for stories, and everyone, your audience, should start looking out for stories that actually do all those things. I think that's where publishing is going.
I think you're so right. And, I think I happened to fall into that just by chance. So, the story that I wrote that is going to go on sub soon is a story about blood magic. It's an art competition, but at its core, it is a story about feminism and oppression of women and sexuality. And so
There
it
you go.
has much deeper meaning through this fantasy lens that so many people are interested in. So I want to go back to you had mentioned that you were writing on Medium and you've moved over to Substack. I also know that you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter, you're all over social media. So first off, can you truly be on every social media outlet, or do you risk burning out, running yourself too thin? And then why have you chosen Substack, and how do you feel like that allows you to connect with your readers?
Yeah, I think to the first part of your question, you need to prioritize. I am on all the social media channels, but my priority is Substack because I've learned, and this took trial and error, so like over years, but I've learned that the way that people connect with me the most is through my long form writing. Doing even a 3 minute video or a 5 minute video. I'm decent at it, but I'm not great at that. So I don't feel like my message and the passion and the skill, my best skill shows itself in those formats. So yes, I'm on Instagram, but my posting on Instagram is just a step over casual. Like, I make sure that I do post that maybe let's say once a week, but my focus is Substack. My focus before that was Medium because that again, that's where my largest communities are. I would say prioritize, do well on one and then figure out how you can move from there. But I do want to caveat that because if your goal now is to be huge, like if your goal is to get 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 subscribers or followers, depending on what platform you're on, then you do need to diversify. So there's a limit, like Substack has a limit, right? So if I do want to get to that 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, I'm going to have to get outside of the Substack network. So that would force me to actually to prioritize a different platform. So I'm saying focus, yes, first build and then move on, but do move on if you want to be bigger. I do want to expand a little bit. I would like to cross the 10, 15,000 mark. So I have been experimenting a little bit more with YouTube, um, and seeing if there are ways for me to gain more followers that way. And then testing LinkedIn to see if that, because I don't think LinkedIn fits, but I feel like sometimes those ones that contrast might fit the best. So I'm testing that out as well. I chose Substack because I was on Substack for a while. I think that's important to know. And when Substack originally started, they started for journalists. Like they were built for journalists who were leaving or being laid off from their jobs during like late 2010. So like 2017, 18, 19. That's when Substack started. I believe they started in 2017. And if you're able to rewind to that time, that's when this whole media world was like beginning to fracture. You know, a lot of journalists started getting laid off. So Substack was built for them, and a lot of journalists gravitated to Substack, started making money, started making six figures. Some of them made seven figures. That's how Substack got started. And then from journalists, they shifted a little bit to just all writers. So then they just created this platform just for writers, you know? So I joined because of that. It felt like a space just for writers. And you were able to do a lot of different things on there. There was no notes back then. There was no video back then. There was just the newsletter. Period. There was nothing else. And then they built in features for the newsletter and built in features for writers. I stayed because Substack is hot right now. You know, it's a place where everyone started gravitating towards. So then when everyone started gravitating towards Substack and they started building out these features to where they could create their own ecosystem, they started notes. Once they started doing that, you could actually grow to a fairly decent size without ever leaving Substack. So for me, that made sense to gather the audience that I wanted. I need readers. Readers are much different than fans. You know, Substack had readers. So for me, it made total sense and it gave me the flexibility to really just own my my audience, you know, so I could take them wherever I want if Substack does not work out, right? Because Substack's going to go grow and change and evolve into something else. They could
Yeah.
do that. I'll just download my subscribers and go over here and I'll still be able to connect with them, even if I have to do it through
Yeah.
Gmail at the end of the day, right?
That's such a great frame of mind to have. In terms of your growth on Substack, have you found that virality or consistency have contributed the most?
Both. I'll have to be honest. So I have been consistent. I started in 2022 on like this version of Writers Are Superstars. I started in 2022. Low growth for the first 2 years. I was experimenting though, so I wasn't expecting too much. And then once I figured out, okay, this is exactly how I want to write, um, I think I started growing at a faster pace. But what got me my most subscribers was a viral post. One of my posts, I talked about a craft technique, you know, that I noticed that authors are doing. I read a lot. So I was reading like R.F. Kuang, I was reading Sally Rooney, and I'm like, oh, I'm noticing this thing that they're doing. And then I read some older books to test my theory to see if it matched up. And I'm like, oh, they didn't do this in other books before. So I just wrote about it. Authors are being a lot more out front with their themes, and authors in the past didn't do that. The post blew up. I got over 1,000 followers based on that single post. So
Wow.
again, if you look at my 5,000 followers right now, uh, uh, a fifth of that at least came from one post. But knowing that it's both means you have to do the consistent part. Because if you're not doing the consistent part, I don't think you give
Right.
yourself a chance to go viral.
Yeah. And then once these people become your subscribers, how do you actually get them to engage?
Yeah, it has to be the content. The other part that's a little bit technical and it is annoying is your subject lines actually have to be really good. I realized that if my subject lines aren't very specific to what me and my editor know will work, the open rates go down. Sometimes it's not possible to create a subject line that speaks directly to what I'm writing about and have it be exciting and have it be something that readers will open without being misleading. And I don't do the misleading thing, like I don't want to do the clickbait thing. So
Yeah.
if I can't figure out a way to spin it that sounds exciting without being misleading, I'm just not going to do it and just suffer the smaller open rate. But it's really about the content. When
Right.
we get it right, I know who's gonna engage. I'm waiting to see the names of the people and Joanne and David. I'm waiting for August. I'm waiting for these people to comment because I know I'm like, we got it right with this post. Like the last post
Yeah.
I put up where I'm like, oh, this happened to me again was the title of the post, which my editor suggested. I had a whole different title. My editor's like, no, Kern, you know what we have to do. This is what we should title it.
So good.
And yeah, we nailed it. And now that post did really well. So it's it's a combination of a really, really strong subject line, which you need to take time to figure out. Really, really, really focus on your subject lines, and then the content obviously has to be special as well.
Right, right. And so you work with your editor. Do you meld your professional publishing career with your online presence? So do you chat with your agent at all about what you're posting on social media? Do those connect?
No, but because I am critical of the publishing industry sometimes he'll email me like, Kern, chill. Kern, could you at least change, like, don't say the actual name of the publisher or something? Or one time I had another semi-viral post about me turning down deals from Scholastic, and Scholastic saw it. That's how you know sometimes it spreads. And Scholastic saw it and they emailed and they're like, "Is- I thought, like, what's happening? Is he not going to sign back with us?" But just because I am published, I personally have had a great publishing experience. My agent is phenomenal. My editors from both from Penguin and Scholastic have been phenomenal. I've had an abnormal experience, but just because I've had an abnormal experience doesn't mean there aren't problems in publishing that I want to speak about. I'm not going to um hold my experience or pretend like my experience is the only experience that matters. So I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about generally what's happening, and what I see, what I've researched, what I speak to authors about, and what their experiences have been. So I don't feel like I should be limited or in any way censored
For sure.
because my experience has been great. No, I'm telling you what's happening out here, and I'm criticizing it, and I criticize it harshly, and I do that intentionally because I don't want to lose the trust of my readers. I don't want them to feel like, oh, Kern is like going soft on publishing. I'm going to tell you the real all the time, and if that's great, yes. If it's not great, then it is what it is. Like the I just did a post about the how the Canadian literary scene is failing, and I was super critical of publishers, like harshly critical about
Yeah.
marketing, and I think I even used the word sucks. But I don't think my editors will take anything I write personally because they know how I feel about them. And they actually respect the fact that I do this type of writing. So it's annoying for my agent, but whatever. He's fine.
No, I think it's so important. Like I said, publishing is such an opaque industry. And
Mhm.
having people that have experienced it and are now sharing that, it's like RF Kuang. You mentioned her. She had a ton of pushback on Yellowface. They didn't want to
Yeah,
publish that book, and it has gotten such a positive response. So I think
exactly.
it's so important.
Yeah.
Now, how about going beyond the internet? So, in terms of building a community and getting those engaged readers to pay attention to you, what in person things have you done?
Oh, wow. Where do I start? I want to. I knew about making sure that I do in-person things as far back as my second self-published book. My first self-published novel, I when I did my book launch, nobody came. I had 10 people and 6 or 7 of them were my family members. I just thought, "Oh, I'm a writer. People know. They support me. Come out." Nobody came. So I was like, "Oh, wow, lesson learned." So for that book, 2 years before I knew I was even gonna publish a book, I hadn't finished writing it yet, I started marketing, and I started figuring out ways to gather people, and the first thing I did was I did a book cover contest for that book at 2 different high schools, and, we did the first round on Tumblr, that tells you how long ago this was. We did the final round in person where we basically bust both those schools down to Artscape, here in Toronto, it's a spot downtown. Um, and it was phenomenal. And not only did the finalists come down, but they brought all their friends, So all those people right now, like we got their emails and everything, all of them are still my fans. All of them are still my readers. That would have been 2015. 6 months after that, because we had all those art pieces from the contestants, I did an art show. I did an exhibition. I now I had the young readers because they came down, they bust down with their friends and they had that experience. They loved it. I want to get my older readers. So I had the art show, made it an all you can drink wine situation. So I got a wine sponsor, charged $40. Um, but what I did at the art show was I had my one of my actor friends read pieces from my novel, which still wasn't done. I still wasn't finished, So and they read pieces, but I was gathering people because once you give people an experience, especially in person, they remember it forever. If it's a good experience, they remember it forever. They'll always talk about that time I went down to the art show and Kern's actor friend read. But like we sold a couple of the pieces, we gave the kids some money because it wasn't about that. It was really about gathering people. And then I got emails. So now I have more emails. Those emails became the foundation of my email list. That foundational email list became the beginning of what I told you how I started Cry magazine. That became the foundation of that, and then obviously that led to Writers Are Superstars. So for me, if you are not if you are not actively trying to figure out ways to gather people in person, or if you're not good at gathering people, going to where they are. That's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. I'm going to go into every school. I'm going to go into the universities. I did a summer camp for young readers for 2 weeks, where I was just leading sessions and workshops and stuff like that on creativity and literacy. So I'm going to go to where these people are and build community face to face. For me, that's been my mission the last couple of years. I haven't thrown an actual event other than my book launches, which again, my book launch went really well last year because I've built this community over the last like 10 years. So when I said I'm having a book launch, everybody came out. I had well over 100 people come out to my book launch. But other than that, I haven't myself thrown an event, but I've been everywhere. And I'm making sure I am super active in as many communities as possible. And I do have a bit of an advantage living in Toronto. There's a literary event in Toronto almost daily. So it's fairly easy for me to stay engaged, and I know that's not the case for everyone, but again, I'm taking advantage of what my privileges are, and that's one of my privileges. So, yeah, that's where I've been the last year or two.
I've been seeing so many of these amazing literary events. Like I know we were at Bianca Murray's book launch
Yeah, wasn't
together.
that amazing?
So good.
What?
Oh my goodness. That gives me something to aim
Yeah,
for my
me
book
too.
launches.
I was so
Yeah.
jealous. I'm like, how did she do this? Like,
I know. Incredible. I think Cece is also just a powerhouse. Cece Lyra, her
yeah,
agent.
she is. I take her courses, by the way. She's so good at teaching craft.
She's really good. Yeah, I signed up for her emotions course. I took that
Mhm.
one in June. It was really, really great. I think she's having a building tension one
Tension
as
course
well
in
in
October,
October.
yep.
It's so great. I mean, having a pulse on the writing world is so important. Knowing what people are doing, knowing who the players are and what's going on, it's just really, really valuable.
Agreed.
So then do you feel like your online and offline communities, they're fairly similar. They feed into each other, people you meet in person will then interact with you online.
Yes, but in different ways. So what I've noticed is that my online community, they want to know purely author stuff. When I engage with people outside of that, what they respond more to life stuff. What are you celebrating, Karen? When's your birthday? They're tapped into the literary stuff as well. I don't want to like say they're not, but they're also tapped into life stuff. So they're the ones who would send me emails. They're the ones who would send me DMs. They're the ones who would invite me out to events. I just went to a writer circle on Monday, so they're the ones that would do that. So they engage with me a little bit more deeply, while the my online audience is more so commenting and reacting to something that I shared rather than being proactive with the engagement.
Right, that makes sense. So then let's say we have a writer who's just starting out and they don't really have a presence online. What would you recommend as the first step to start building a community?
First step, start experimenting. I would say enter into whatever you're going to do with an open mind and don't feel like that's where you need to end. So if you start and you're like, I'm just going to write about myself and that's it. Well, if you're writing about yourself for 6 months and you've gotten 10 followers, then maybe let's think about a different way to go about this. I still experiment with different things now. And I think it's important because first of all, even though people are engaged and I love my readers and my audience, people get bored. They like if the consistency of your letters, of your newsletter, or of your output of your content is important, But consistency with variety, I think, is really key. I think you have to find different things to add to keep people just a little bit on their toes, so they feel a little bit more excited about your work and they feel like there's something else coming. So how are you going to find ways to make sure that that still feels exciting for them? And then I would also say find a way to from the very outset define what your goals are, because that's going to define how you actually move. So if your goal is to get uh, a a lot of subscribers because you wanna sell books, then that's gonna be different than if you just want to, be someone who is not an author, but you wanna sell courses. Or that's gonna be different than if you don't care about any of that stuff and you just want your writing out there for people to read. Your cadence will change, the your headlines will change, the style of your writing will change. All of that changes depending on your goals. And then the last thing I would say that's really important is as you state your goal and you're experimenting, find a way to gauge how close or far you're getting to those goals. So maybe create milestones. Is it engagement, like actual engagement? Is it follower count or subscriber count? Like what metric are you using for success so that you can gauge whether or not you're going in the right direction? And if your metric for success could at the beginning be I want to post consistently for 2 months. Well, if you could post consistently for 2 months, boom, then you've nailed that, right? So I think
Yeah.
find a way to gauge your success so that because then it's very difficult for when you're experimenting, it's very difficult to change course if you're not gauging what success is supposed to be like in the first place. So the where are you changing to? Where are you trying to get to? But yeah, the first thing that though is just start. I'm a firm believer in this. You will know if you have the right magic, the right set of circumstances, like your content mixed with your tone, mixed with your personality. You'll know if those things are working by people's reactions. So once people start reacting in the way that you want them to react, then you know you're onto something. And if they're not reacting in that way after else has been consistent and you're doing everything that you need to do, then you know something has to change. You'll feel momentum. You'll feel people are really connecting with this. Okay, I see what people are why people are so excited. Once you feel that, then keep going. Double down on it.
And what's something that you wish that you had learned earlier?
Which one of these things do I wish I learned earlier? Maybe everything. No, not everything. I wish that I had just went straight to a including myself a little bit more into the content on Substack. When I initially started off Substack, like writers are superstars, it was just publishing and pop culture and really not including myself in them because I was like, well, this is not about me. This is about publishing and pop culture. And when I really started getting traction on Substack is when I started giving a little bit more of myself into it. So yeah, I'm still giving you publishing and pop culture, but I'm also giving you that from my lens and from my experience. I was nervous about that at first because not because I'm afraid to share my story, but I thought it would in some way distort the messaging. But really, what I realized is the more I actually talk about myself and my experiences and put myself in the stories, the better reactions we get. You know, people actually were interested in me. And that was just that. I don't know if it was difficult for me to accept that for whatever reason, but I wish I had known that earlier because I feel like I probably would have had more subscribers now if I was just more of putting myself out there and throwing myself into the stories, into the pieces that I was writing. But honestly, because I was coming from doing Cry, which was 1,000% personal and vulnerable and only about me and other people writing about themselves and me editing those pieces, I think I felt a little bit worn down from that. Like everyone knows so much about my life. I remember feeling like, I don't want to talk about myself anymore. So I think that's what I was experiencing at that time. But once I realized that I don't have to talk about necessarily my personal life anymore, I could just talk about what kind of experiences I'm having as a published author, as a former self-published author, as someone who's building community, as someone who has a film, as someone who um, went years and years and years really trying to get into the world that I'm in right now and actually succeeding in it as someone who sold tens of thousands of books. I'm doing these things now and not feeling ashamed of them and actually putting them front and center, but still um making sure that there's a story, a bigger cultural kind of view around that. I think that's the new magic for me right now, the new kind of formula that works.
That's incredible. Now, what can we expect from you in the future?
Oh, so many more books. I woke up this morning, my agent gave me a little bit of a curveball with something. I had sent him a piece. that was nonfiction, and he's like, "Oh, I love this, but I love it as fiction. Would you mind spinning it into fiction?" So I was like, I'm like, "Fine, I'll try it," because he's never steered me wrong. So I'm working on that. I'm also ghostwriting 2 books right now, which feels like a lot. There's another nonfiction piece that I just sent my agent that we're about to go on sub for right now. And that one I'm really excited about because I've never written a book in nonfiction. I've written stuff nonfiction for my blogs, but I've never written a book nonfiction. So I've taken a very specific incident and I'm writing a collection of essays based on how that incident has affected my entire life. And so that's fingers crossed. That one feels like very big to me. So I'll probably know in the next 2 months whether that goes through. Then have a book for Penguin right now that we're on our first deep edit. Um, that one's gonna come out. I don't remember what we signed the contract, but I honestly don't remember. I think it's late 26. And then I'm redoing a companion novel for Scholastic. The first one did really well. Is There a Boy Like Me did sold really well, so they asked me to do a companion novel. So I'm working on that. I actually have a meeting with my editor, because I have a new editor at Scholastic. I have a meeting with her right after this call. So we're gonna talk about that. I am at capacity. If you want to know, I am at capacity right now. I honestly taking on more projects would be great, but it's just I have a lot. I have a lot, and I just shot a short film last Friday, a 15-hour day shoot.
Oh my
Ah,
gosh. I feel stressed just listening to all of it. But wow, you are truly doing fantastic things, Kern, and you're so charismatic. It's just easy to want to follow your journey. Thank you so much for joining me today.
thank you for having me. I love it. Invite me back.
Of course. Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode of the Pros podcast.